I'm Suzanne Marcel. I'm the lead architect for the Center of Enablement team for Cerner Corporation. Cerner is a healthcare IT company. This is our obligatory slide. This is for informational purposes only. Today our agenda is going to include a brief introduction to Cerner so that you understand what we're all about, what our current state technologies are, also how we chose to design TDM and what the implementation approach we've taken. Also we'll go over how we plan to define or assess our metrics. And then I want to talk about some keys for success and a few lessons that we learned in this long journey. This is who we are. We are very passionate about healthcare. For us, it's more than the doctors and the hospitals and the insurance companies. It's about the people that are impacted, our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers. People's lives actually depend on our software. With health information technology at our core, we employ some of the best software engineers, developers, and clinicians to ensure that we're delivering state-of-the-art healthcare solutions. Today we have over 25,000 associates actually, and we're the world's largest publicly traded healthcare IT company. Our 2015 revenue topped $4.4 billion, and we attribute much of that success to actually creating solutions for some of healthcare's toughest challenges. So I want to talk about our current state, what we look like. This is just a small list of our healthcare solutions that we develop today. We're developing over 250 different healthcare solutions. So we have a broad range of technologies used across multiple platforms. For our databases, we're using mainly Oracle, but we also have teams that use MySQL, SQL Server, HBase, and Sybase. With 40 million lines of code, our programming languages can range from C++ to C# to .NET, Java, Ruby, Ruby on Rails, HTML, and JavaScript, to name a few. We're all over the place. Our primary desktop electronic health record is called Millennium, and it's tightly coupled across many teams. So the data from one solution is dependent on data from the solution upstream. And even though we're tightly coupled and we integrate, each team can release on their own schedule. Our Millennium database, again, is the core of our healthcare solution. It's an Oracle relational database, and it's a single architecture design. We have over 9,000 tables within our Millennium database. We have soft constraints and complex business logic. We average about 100 schema changes a month, and that can be anywhere from brand new tables to additional columns on existing tables. We have we maintain over 300 production environments. And right now, our TDM implementation includes connections between 4 different networks with firewalls. So we are in the process of moving to shift left, as I'm sure many of you are here. Before that, we didn't really have a holistic testing strategy. And I'm sure that you guys all understand the pain points that we all have with our databases, with the inconsistent test environments, the corrupted reference data, and very limited production-like data. So we're not really testing the way our clients actually use the system. So with the move to shift left and automated testing, we decided to purchase Test Data Manager about a year ago. And this is our design and implementation approach. So we did establish a Center of Enablement team early, which management approved and were supportive of that measure because it's such a big, complex tool. And we govern the Center of Enablement team governs that test data management process. We use Agile with Jira. We have a mixed process with a super user concept. So we're going to have not only the Center of Enablement team, which are going to be our admin users, but we also have, just a little bit underprivileged, are the super users. But they will actually be able to get into the client tool and develop test data for their teams. We use some subset and clone as the primary functionality within this tool. And we're focusing on activity data first, or transactional data, that may be what you call it. We thought we might be able to also in parallel work with the reference data, but we've identified that that's going to take us a little bit longer. It's more complex. And we're going to provide small pieces of value, small pieces of the patient activity data, and then get that out to as many users, testers as we can. So our software is patient-centric, and as I said, we're working on delivering one piece of the patient at a time. Many of our end users have come to us and said, if you could just give us a registered patient in our database, then we can take it from there. But it's that hard just to go in and register a patient because of those corrupted environments. So that's what we're doing. The green items with the checks mean that we are actually able to provision or publish those pieces of data for that patient. And as I said, we're using the subset process, the subset and clone. And the numbers in the parentheses are actually the number of tables that are pulled into that subset. So you can see, just for a registered patient in our system, we're using 15 tables. And then over on the right, you see an inpatient encounter. That's actually as if you had a patient in a hospital setting. And by adding that little bit to the activity data to that patient, now we've jumped up to 69 tables. Currently, we're working on providing some clinical data, smoking history for our patient, and now we're up to 126 tables. So with every piece of clinical data that we're adding, that's more and more tables that we have to subset, and it does take a little bit longer to get through all of our complex business logic or define those relational tables with the soft constraints. A couple other things that we've been able to do is we're opening up the tiles in the web portal, so to allow the user, when they come in to request data, they can make changes to some of those fields in those tiles. So such as person name or age, gender, address, those types of things. So we're defining which fields we're going to open up for the end user. We're doing batch processing now. We're still working with that, but we have proven that it does work. We've been able to register 200 patients scheduled overnight. And we're working on a headless testing pilot. So we're trying to access those APIs that are with the web portal in order to call the API from a Jenkins job, publish the data, and then turn around and go run an automated test. So that's all under pilot. So our tool design, for our tool design, we have a dev, cert, and prod tool design. And then the databases for the TDM metadata exist or reside on those tool servers. So for each tool, for a dev, we have a corresponding metadata database for the test data manager instructions. We've established an empty staging database, and I'm going to talk a little bit more through this. This is unique to what we do, what we have to do because of our complex database. And the databases for the test data repository, we have 2 of them. These are our source environments. We have a cert and we have a prod. We also use virtual environments so that we can spin up a virtual environment, push data to the virtual environment, and then test it or validate that the data is correct. For the web portal itself, it's going to access the prod TDM metadata for those data pool instructions, and the source will be our prod gold repository. This is how we've deployed TDM. Any user that needs test data in our organization will have access to the web portal. And the tool itself will have a correspondence with the TDM assets or the metadata repository. It also will use our Millennium Gold environment for that source environment. That's a clean copy of our Millennium database. So we are starting with something clean. The TDM developers or our super users and our Center of Enablement team will actually be allowed on those thick clients and will be able to get in and create data. What I want to point out is the pre-publish step. This is an empty Oracle shell that we use to help store the translated data from our source to our target environment. There's a lot of things that we have to do to ensure that when we push data to the target environment, that it's populating it correctly because of all those business complex requirements. So some of the things that the staging database helps us with, we have a series of our own SQL scripts that will go out, and for column A and table B, if it has business logic in there, we have to go match that into the target environment. So, and then we kind of store it in that empty shell until everything has been matched up, and then we go through a publish process. So just a quick look at our metrics. The organization that I'm in is called IP Development. It is about 10% of the total Cerner population, or maybe a little bit more, 15, I'm not sure. I've got my Cerner people over here. They're just giving me blank stares. I think it's around there. So what I'm trying to say is this is not the whole company when I talk through these metrics. We only looked at the testers and the software engineers that were in our org, our IP development org, and we identified that combined, they're spending about 645,000 hours a year provisioning, building, maintaining test data. And we can break that down, but you kind of get the picture. We have 500 test analysts, and we thought about 50%, that's industry average, maybe even on the low side. And then for the software engineers, we're using 10% of their time building and maintaining test data. I was a software engineer for a long, long time, and I know I spent more than 10% of my time doing that. So we think these numbers are pretty conservative. Once we get our organization, our testers and our software engineers onboarded, we truly believe that we're going to be able to save at least 50% of that time. So that's 50% of their time that they can redirect into testing more and covering more requirements. And we think that's going to have a natural result of reducing the defects that are found in our clients' environment. So we're trying to find them early before we get them to that production database where the clients are talking to us. It really, through this process, we've been working on this process since February. It took us a long time to finally realize that we needed to change the way that we were going to deliver or publish data. And we went from thinking that we would be able to comprehensively deliver a whole bunch of data, prerequisite data per test case. And that, that we're talking reference data, we're talking activity data, and we really found out that that's not going to happen for a long time. So we needed to pivot and figure out how can we get the value out there to the masses and still keep going. So right now we're just, like I said, we're only looking at the activity data. We're not getting into reference data yet. And we eventually want to, with every new aspect or concept that's attached to that patient, we will eventually have a full patient with full clinical data, and that's going to be useful for our end users. And the other thing that I want to mention, we have a tracking process in place where we're tracking what gets published. So for example, if a registered patient is published, I'm counting that. So for every registered patient that gets published, then I have a tally on that, completely counting it. Then for every patient that gets published that is in a hospital setting, that's another count that I'm going to make. And then, those patients that have clinical data on them, I'm going to start counting, okay, how many patients with orders, how many patients with lab results, how many patients with vital signs. So we're actually collecting that in our metadata, the TDM metadata, and that is being pulled into an Access database and then delivered into an Excel spreadsheet that is complete with all kinds of dashboards to really measure. And we've defined how much time it would take manually to go create a patient with an encounter or create a patient with lab orders or lab results. Then once we can say, okay, I've got 10 patients that have been published, and I know that for each one of those patients it takes 20 minutes actually manually to go develop. Now I know how much time I'm going to save. So lastly, I just want to talk through some keys for success and lessons learned. In a good way, it was not really too difficult to get management to buy into this tool. With our shift left testing and the push to go to continuous delivery, they know that our environments are the cornerstone of making that happen. Without good testing environments and good testing data, then we're not going to be able to run automated tests and truly go to a continuous development. So that was actually pretty easy. Then we established a Center of Enablement team very early. And we were able to work through some of the processes that we knew that we wanted to use. For example, going with Agile. Our development teams are Agile with Jira, so that seemed natural for us to go that route as well. But also the super users, defining that we were going to give a subset of people the ability to go into the tools and create that data for their teams. This was really crucial for us because my team is very small and we would have been a bottleneck had we not done that. So it was important for us to pull in a subset of super users. So you also want to define the TDM architecture. How do you want your TDM architecture designed and set up? As I said, we have the Dev, Cert, and Prod tool servers that also house those metadata databases. You've got to consider your source environments. For every different database type, you have to have at least one source environment. And that should be like a gold environment. And in our case, as I said, we have a Cert and a Prod. So we do some validation and testing in Cert before we're pushing that repository of data up to Prod. I already mentioned virtual domains. We use that a lot. The other thing is to determine what tools, what functionality in this tool set is going to fit your environment. When we did the proof of concept, we actually did do a lot of work on the data generation side. Once we got into this process, we soon realized that if we did data generation, we were going to have to recreate that complex business logic in the tool, and that is not maintainable, and it's also pretty dangerous. We didn't want to do that, so we looked into the subset process, and that really is the functionality that's going to work the best for us. I don't know if anybody has been in the tool, in the Data Maker tool, or even in the web portal, but there is a project structure. You will want to define what that project structure looks like. Is it going to be by teams, perhaps? You can have some security around the projects and the versions that you use. We know that we're going to have a project of common data or common data pools that anybody can go into. We're still thinking through how do we secure the other projects to be more team specific, or do we just open it up to everybody? So we're still making some decisions and refining that process. What is your security going to look like? As I said, we're going to allow everybody who needs test data into the web portal. That's 25,000 associates. Therefore, we need LDAP and Active Directory to work. If you're familiar with that at all, that allows us to take this pre-populated list of all of our associates, and we'll get the changes as associates come and go, and then we would set up restrictions around those groups. So that's what we're working on right now. Identify what your training needs are going to be. If you have software engineers or software architects that are going to be implementing this or creating those scripts or any of the SQL that goes along with it, they probably can get by on an overview using WBTs or some type of online training. So my suggestion would be to ask for more advanced training for those people. And then figure out what your communication strategy is going to look like. We've done a number of meetings, emails, posters. We're kind of going through that whole communication strategy, word of mouth, and then adoption is the key. And we really have a good problem at Cerner because I have teams that are giving me resources because they want to see this moving faster. They're ready to get it into their teams and solutions, and so they're just giving me engineers, which is wonderful. So I think adoption is going to be pretty easy for us. So these are my lessons learned. I really thought it would be, I hate to use the word out of the box because I knew we were going to have to do a lot of teaching of the tool, but it was much more complex than that. And if you have a database with the complex logic in those tables that we do, similar to what we do, then you need to expect to spend a lot more time up front, and I mean a lot. It takes a long time to figure out all the table relationships and what the business logic is. If I've got 200 different solutions, they each have their own data models, I don't know their data model. I might understand our core data models and some of the solutions that I worked on, but I don't know our radiology data model. I don't know what business logic they have in there. So it's also reaching out to these teams and trying to get resources from them to help define what their business logic is, and then helping to create a SQL script that will populate the target environment correctly. We assumed a comprehensive start for a few. So we had actually 3 early adopter teams, and we said, give us your 10 top priority test cases, and we're going to deliver all the prerequisite data for those top 10 tests. And it didn't go so well. So we had to really do an about face and scale that back and say, okay, if we just deliver a patient, if we start small and just keep adding on, we're still adding value. It's non-zero value. And a lot of teams just have come up to us and said, if you could just get me that patient in that environment, I'm fine. I can do the rest. That would be a huge win. So think if you do have those complex databases like we do, then think small to start out with. That would be my lesson learned.